Hi everyone, I'm Himesh Joshi, founder and CEO at Ayu Health.
If you have ever admitted a loved one to a hospital, then you would surely realize how chaotic and overwhelming the whole process is. IU Health is a startup on a mission to fundamentally disrupt the patient experience at hospitals by using transparency and tech. In this episode of the Founder Thesis podcast, your host Akshay Dutt talks to Himesh Joshi, the founder of IU Health. Himesh is a serial founder whose first venture was in the used goods segment, and he raised almost $20 million for it before settling for an acquisition by Quicker. In this candid conversation, he shares his journey as a first time founder, what he learned from it, and how it changed his approach in his next venture. Stay tuned and subscribe to the Founder Thesis podcast on any audio streaming platform to hear lessons from serial entrepreneurs on selecting the right problem and building for scale.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rajasthan.
Mm.
So I was born in Ajmer. And then my father was in a bank, so we keep moving around. Most kids in Rajasthan back then, I went to Kota.
Okay.
For JEE. I failed the first time. So I actually dropped. So I spent 3 years in Kota, right? I was there for 2 years.
Okay.
And I was I was expecting to get top 200, 300. I would score well. And I was ranked pretty high. And then I sort of spent one more year over there, and that year was relatively easier. I did get in eventually a pretty good rank. So,
Did you have like a cultural assimilation challenge joining IIT Bombay, having lived
not
a small
really.
town
Actually,
life?
so the IIT culture was very different and different in a good way, but it was new for everyone. So everyone was getting adjusted to it. And IIT Bombay is one of the, or at least in my time, I don't know how it is today, but in my time, it was one of the nicer campuses for freshmen. Like, there was almost zero ragging.
Okay.
Seniors were very friendly. The hostel culture was continuously pretty good. So it was fun.
And what did you choose as a career, like once you finished your engineering?
So I got into management consulting. I worked that for 2 years in India. I spent a year in New York as well.
Okay.
I think management consulting attracted me at that point because I felt it was a good way to get to know the world, right? Like you do a lot of things. You have pretty good exposure. So in that sense, it worked out well. But I will be honest, and I wouldn't say that it was a very thought through decision. It was just the cool job to get. In fact, I had a pre-placement offer, so I was allowed to sit only for two companies, and the only two I sat for were the top two consulting firms because I didn't even think if the third one was worth being on that list. So yeah, I did that 2 years, and I think then once I got in, I sort of started thinking, okay, what next, right? Like, okay, let's break free of that mold, and I think that's probably when I, for the first time, did something that was not expected, right? So, at that point, most of my batch was getting into private equity or venture capital after a year and a half, 2 years at consulting, and I didn't even apply. I mean, I applied to one place and I just withdrew because I said I don't want to do this. Right? I know I want to do something else, and I was lucky to get an opportunity to move to New York at that point, which I felt was an interesting thing at that point because I would get exposure to a different environment, and I also was never really sold on the idea of an MBA. So I came back, and by then I had enough of consulting as well. So that was when I started thinking, let's do something else. And at that point, what attracted was let's do something of our own. So that was not just me; them. They were by then. I had my other co-founders who continue to be my co-founders today, as well.
They were IIT friends, or you met them at BCG?
So there were four of us when we started my previous venture. 3 out of the 4 now are co-founders at IU Health. So out of the 4, 2 were friends from BCG. We were part of the same cohort. And then Arjit, who's my co-founder today as well, is a friend from school, like so friend from Kota, but we realized then that we were from the same town. He went to boarding school, so we never were in the same school, but we were from Alwar, right? And what are the odds of that? When we started thinking we wanted to start up, obviously there were these 3 consultants, but we wanted a guy who understood tech. And Arjit was the one I called up. He also was at that point looking to do something of his own. He had been in Amazon, Flipkart, Adobe, so he had done the usual stuff, and he was looking for something different. So fortunately for us, he felt excited about what we wanted to do,
So,
and that's how we got together.
I mean, was it an idea first, or was it like, let's do entrepreneurship?
It was a lot. We were all clear that we wanted to do something of our own, and actually, uh, Rohit and Karan, who were the other two co-founders, were actually working at venture capital. Right? So
Okay.
they had also seen this up close, and 2015 was still early days, I would say, right? Like starting up was not as common, and the ecosystem was still fairly nascent. But they had also seen a lot of companies from close quarters, and this was when, like, say, companies like Big Basket were just beginning to start, and Rohit had been an investor over there. So yeah, we got excited about that. I think we felt this is a good time for us to try something of our own. We were all fairly young. We were not looking to get married for a while. We had all made decent money, so we could take a risk. And that is what sort of got us together. And then as you said, we had a very analytical approach, like all consultants, and we said, "Chalo, let's scout the world for what we think is an interesting idea."
Tell me, like, the 0 to 1 process of from wanting to be entrepreneurs to actually launching something.
So I think that conversation lasted for almost a year. Right? Like, so, say 6 months into my New York stint, I was clear I want to do something of my own. I mean, the rest of the folks were also beginning to arrive in the same conclusion. So we had started talking, and we were deliberating on a bunch of ideas. Eventually, what got us excited was e-commerce for used goods. The thesis at that point was that India had gotten used to buying online. Right? Like in the US, you have eBay, you have Craigslist, which is actually the number one platform, or at least at that point was number one. And the difference that he felt was, and India also had OLX and Quicker at that point, right? So they had also become largish. But the difference that we felt was that India was inherently a low trust market. So the pure classified model would not work here. And that is something that reflected when we spoke with users as well, that how do I trust someone who has put up a TV for sale saying the TV works? What if I buy it, I bring it to my home, and after 2 days, it just stops working?
Right.
Right. And that happens as well. And then if you're going to call them that guy and say, "Oh, sorry, I want to give it back," there's no way you can do that. So because India is a low trust market, if you look at all used goods categories, the dominant players are the ones who own the transaction, right? So we felt that therefore the pure classified model won't work in India. So our approach was that we will take ownership of inventory. So if you want to buy a used sofa, you will buy it from us, right? So we would have bought that sofa from a user or from a business that was looking to sell end of life inventory or surplus stock. And then we are putting our marker, we're putting our warranty on the product. We're giving you a return window. We're giving you,
you'll refurbish it.
EMIs. Or everything that you expect with an e-commerce experience. But obviously the price here is half of what it will cost to buy a new product. And that we felt was an interesting model. Obviously, it was a little complex operationally because you then have to own inventory, you need to have these refurbishment centers, but the margins kind of justified that. And we felt that it was fairly, while it was a lot of work, it was not a lot of different work for different categories. So you had this playbook that you had to put in place, and then you just do the same thing again and again.
Okay.
So that's what we did. We started off with furniture because that is what we felt was the highest friction category, because furniture is also difficult to carry around, right? If you want to buy a sofa, that's even more difficult. So you might still trust okay, the sofa is good, but how do I even get it to my house? So there's a logistical problem as well. So we felt that was a category where the problems were more pronounced than the other categories. And we eventually got into large appliances, then into TVs, then into mobile phones as well. And
what was your MVP? Like your MVP must have been a website with some logistics integration, or like?
Yeah, so logistics were our own. So it was essentially just
that integrating logistics was not so easy that time.
It didn't exist at that point.
Yeah.
We didn't have the ship rockets of the world. So you had to do everything yourself. So our first delivery people were a core team. Like I delivered probably the first 100 orders myself. So we would sit in a truck and go around the city all day. But the first product was just a website. And interestingly, so we launched the website with 100 odd products. I remember so our office was inside a warehouse. We had taken a small warehouse in Sarjapur Road in Bangalore, and we basically constructed a small cabin over there, and it was just the 10 of us. So we had a small meeting room and an open area to work on. So this was, I remember very clearly, this was around 10, 11 in the night. We took the website live and we were all very excited. Chalo, this is live. Obviously, we were not expecting any orders because nobody knew that this website existed. And then one of my co-founders posted the link of this website on a Facebook group that would transact and use goods. And suddenly we started getting orders. And it's like that eureka moment where you think, okay, this thing has value. So we were like, I remember we were all walking out of the warehouse. We were just going to shutter it down and we would do all of this ourselves. We had no security. And then we just got so excited. There was a bed lying around and we all just sat on it. And then we think, okay, 5 orders, 6 orders. And immediately I was worried, how do I deliver these tomorrow? Because we had one truck and these are all like from various parts of Bangalore. So obviously that was a good problem to have. We were able to deliver those. But
based on conversations with other founders, my understanding is that used goods e-commerce is more about finding supply than finding demand, because India is cost conscious, so demand exists if you find good supply. So how did you, when you listed 100 products, how did you source those 100 products? And
these are all bought from users. And they were bought from OLX. So we piggybacked on the existing platform. So we would call them up, we will go and visit, we will do a QC. Eventually we had people coming to us directly. But and I think that's the other reason why we felt the model would work, because when we spoke with those sellers, they were also unhappy because you would get these hundreds of these calls. People would just haggle. Nobody will actually turn up. Someone will turn up and then quote a dirt cheap rate. And it was a nightmare to sell stuff. So they also appreciated the fact that there was this one platform that's giving me a guarantee as long as the product is good and they'll come in and pick it up. So it was a 1-0 for us. We would always tell our users that based on what you've told us, this is the price we'll offer. Now, if the product is not in good condition, it's a 0. Otherwise, it's a 1, we'll pick it up. They're not going to come in and haggle at that point. And we will let you choose a slot when you get it picked up. We'll send a team that's professional. We'll take care of not screwing up your house paint while we take the stuff out. Like all of that stuff is important for people. So we were solving problems for both. The other thing that also happened on the supply side was, and this was again very circumstantial, we knew the Urban Ladder folks well because these were friends from college and then a few other people. And in fact, Urban Ladder was one of the, their team was always very helpful no matter what we wanted help with. So I was visiting their warehouse and I noticed that their team was working on a brand new dining table in the warehouse. And I was like, why are you guys using your new products and just having your team sit on it? And he was like, no, this is the second product. So then he showed me there was this small chip on one of the legs. And I was like, this is great. We will buy it. So that's how one of the most popular categories was born. So we would call it the unboxed category, where essentially we were saying we will go and buy products from all brands. And eventually this was not just Urban Ladder, this was all major furniture brands, all major mobile phone and appliances brands. And these were products that would have, say, a refrigerator that has a dent on the door, right? Now, you can't sell it as a new product, but if I sell it for 70%, people will line up to buy it. So that became an interesting part of supply as well.
Interesting. Okay. And how did you fund it? Like you had employees early on, you had a van or a truck or something.
So we raised money with an idea on paper, and I think we were privileged in that sense. So two of my co-founders were from a venture capital firm. Those guys were kind enough to believe in what we wanted to do, give us some money to get started. So we had that money.
Okay. Amazing. Okay. So I'm wondering why you didn't take the Cashify approach. Like, Cashify is into used phones and their approach is sell on Cashify. I mean, everywhere they advertise, their marketing spend is sell on Cashify, and but you were spending on buy from Zepho. Like that was what your marketing spend would have been on. So what is the difference between these two approaches and why did you take the latter?
So we were actually spending on both. We were spending on buy and sell. And we felt it made sense because at least for furniture and large appliances, we wanted to retain the entire spread. So we felt that there was value in keeping that inventory and then selling it on. And what it also did was it would create this virtuous cycle. So every product that we would sell, we will put a buyback guarantee on that. So the behavior that we saw was people would buy something and then in a year they'll come back and exchange it for something else, right? And at buyback would have a certain premium if you're buying something again from us. So people started using this as a model where, I want to change my coffee table. Okay, no, I'm bored of this. I get a new one. So we felt it was a better model in that sense. However, the Cashify model is the better model for mobile phone, and that's something we figured the moment we started it. So mobile phones was something we started only towards the fag end of our tenure at Zepho, and we realized that the problem is that phones, the obsolescence cycle is very high, right? Like, so you don't want to be sitting on the product for too long. And if you want to get it into refurbishment and all of these things for phones, then the product keeps depreciating in value very fast. Right? So either you have a very, very strong refurbishment engine and you're able to refurbish and put it back up for sale. Otherwise, you're better off in just giving it to these resellers who will then have the means to refurbish and then sell them on, or they'll just cannibalize them for parts and then still make money out of it.
Got it. Okay. And so, tell me, like from year to year, like 2015 was like, in that year, what were the categories you were doing? What kind of sales did you generate, and what kind of fundraise did you do? And if you could like paint a picture of your journey at Zepho.
So see, 15 we started. I think we started in March or April, or at least March is when I landed in Bangalore. So maybe the website went live in August. Actually, I remember now. And we were just doing furniture in Bangalore. That's it. Then 16 is when we started large appliances.
And what revenue did you do in 15? Like, what was your GMV?
We would have exited the year maybe doing 50 lakhs a month, around that, 40 to 50 lakhs a month.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it was more than we had expected. We thought it'll take some time for us to get the marketing engine running, but we were always supply constrained at that point. Like, we would always run out of products, especially the unbox category. That was a huge hit. So we will get in a new Urban Ladder lot, and it will go in 2 days, and then we'll have to go and get more. So you're right on that point that there was the best selling products were always supply constrained. And so 50, 16, I think broadly towards the end of the year. Then beginning of 2016, we started large appliances. So again, we were not doing TVs still because we thought TVs was still easier. What was more difficult was refrigerators, washing machines, and so on. So we started that, and then 3 months on, we started TVs as well. And 2016 is also when we started Delhi. So we got into to NCR as well. So we set up a warehouse in Gurgaon, and we were catering to the entire region.
How did you find
this is the year?
You would need a lot of working capital, right? The more categories you add, the more working capital you need because you are paying in advance.
Yeah. So initially it was equity, but obviously that was not a sustainable solution. So we started then doing invoice discounting and some of these practices as well. So we got, we would raise debt, especially say if you were buying products from businesses, say Amazon. Right? So there we will have to pay upfront, but then we would raise debt and that will be baked into our cost structure.
Okay. So you had like a institutional BNPL mechanism.
Yeah, you could say that. And so we had these sellers on our platform who will buy the products from Amazon or Flipkart or any other brand, and then we would help them raise the money through say someone like a Credix.
Okay.
Or a Giraffe, which didn't exist back then, but now does.
So your platform had like seller onboarding also, like sellers could directly list, because you said you wanted to control the whole transaction.
Yeah, so these were still sellers who would buy the inventory, but the inventory would be sitting in our warehouse. We would be the ones who work on the inventory, right? So these were essentially sellers who were just putting in capital and allowing us to not put our own money into buying the product. But we would still do our own QC on it. There will be sellers who will come up with products that were ready, but then we would still insist on those to be in our warehouse. We would still insist on checking. We might not refurbish them. So we opened up that at some point because we realized that we also needed more supply. And there were these quote unquote dealers, right, in the market.
Yeah.
But we would never allow them to ship directly because we were never sure if they will do a good job.
Okay. Interesting. And how did you acquire these sellers? Like, this was like, again, cold calling, telling them sell through us, and
yeah, there was so this was again not a very large portion, the institutional sellers. So, but this was done through a team that was on the street, and they would, like, Bangalore has a few hotspots where there are a lot of these used good sellers, right? So you know where to find them. But the individual sellers would all come through our own marketing efforts, right? So we would also advertise to sellers, people who are looking to sell, and then the institutional relationships would be struck by a different team. So we were also powering exchange for, say, a Flipkart and Amazon. So during Diwali, for example, it used to be a big deal for us as well, because then suddenly Flipkart would do thousands of units of washing machines, and they would want us to deal with everything, right? So we would take a new warehouse. We would then have a bit of a Cashify model where we will get the inventory, we'll quickly segregate and say whatever is not good enough, let's just give it out directly, and only the cream gets kept for refurbishment. So those were institutional relationships were run in a very different fashion, but then there were not a lot of those. These were usually the large brands and the large e-com platforms.
Okay. So coming back to 2016, so you opened up Delhi, you opened up large appliances, and you also opened up television towards the end of the year.
Yeah, we opened that up, and I think 2016 and we also went to Bombay. So we were in 3 cities, and I think this was the year when things were all rosy and we were growing pretty fast. We had a phenomenal Diwali. I remember 2016 Diwali, we did very decent numbers. So for us, it was the first wave of Diwali is powering the exchange programs and all, getting that supply. And then the second was our own sale, where we'll try to also sell a lot of these things.
Yeah, you raised your Series A also, I think, in 2016.
We raised a Series A also. So Series A happened in 2016 on the back of some progress. Yeah. Yes. So Sequoia came on board at that point. And this was also quite pivotal for us, because until then, one of the big problems for us had been a lot of investors we would talk to will want to know if a model like this existed in a China or a US. We would be at pains to explain that, yeah, it's a different market, India is a very different market, and it requires a different approach. And that's why I'm actually forever grateful to the investors who did come in, because I could see that they wanted to back an idea that was different. This was true for Helion, which gave us the seed check, and eventually Sequoia and a couple of other investors also came in. So they didn't want us to tell them why this was working in other markets. They were more interested in knowing why it was working in India.
What GMV?
Our NPS scores were, I think we would have gotten close to about a 10 CR a month mark, 6-7 crore, maybe not 10, maybe 10 is what 10-12 is what could have done the year after. But yeah, it had grown phenomenally well.
Right. So when you say you were profitable, that includes the cost of acquiring the customer, or removing that cost, you were profitable on the transaction?
So cost of acquiring the customer and the cost of servicing that product and the logistics cost, right? So we were in Bangalore, I remember we were profitable in a very short span of time, because the margins were very good. Like when the category like furniture, you have upwards of 40 to 50% margin. So CM positive was never a challenge for us. I mean, it became a challenge at a later point when we were also trying to grow, and I'll talk about this. We were trying to grow against the grain. But initially, it was very easy in that sense.
Amazing. So what was the burn on, like, on the building the technology stack? And
so our technology team was about 16. I think it would have been 10 people altogether. 10 to 15 people, so product and technology combined. It was always a fairly lean team. Even at a peak, we had more 25 people.
Okay. But you said that you were still burning money in 2016. What was it on, like?
So the burn would go on newer cities, right? This is when we had launched Mumbai and NCR. And Mumbai and NCR were not as easy to crack in terms of economics, especially, like, say, NCR, for example, huge geography. The delivery costs were high. You also need to get to a certain scale for routing efficiencies to come in terms of deliveries and all. Yeah, word of mouth as well. So CAC was also so that was one, and the other was this a lot of these HO costs, right? So technology, product, marketing, teams. So the cost of the teams. But that was where most of the money would go in.
Okay, so, got it.
So, and I think 17, 18 is when we started getting to a point where we realized that we would hit a cap in each market. We got Bangalore furniture to a certain point, and then it became a little difficult to grow. We'll get Bangalore appliances to a certain point, and then it became a little difficult to grow. And that is when we started acknowledging the fact that the market was not as large, right? And that was a tough realization. But we always had known that the market was not insanely large. But what we had backed on was that it will continue to grow quite fast, right? So I think that is where the thesis sort of went wrong. But in terms of why there was a cap, if I talk about the demand side, there was, and there continues to be a bit of a taboo around used goods in the Indian context, right? So people don't necessarily want to buy a used product unless there's strong value on it. And what happened in 20, late 2017, 18 is that Flipkart and Amazon became quite aggressive with their private labels. So you had new televisions and new appliances and new furniture as well being sold for close to used good prices. These are obviously inferior in quality. And so we would be selling an LG TV for 8,000 bucks, but then you would have a Flipkart branded new TV for 8,000 bucks. Chinese import. And people won't care. They'll say, but this is new, right? And then there was an uphill battle for us to convince them on why this was still good quality. So that became one challenge. Right? The other bit was supply, where I think the problem for us was that our model was still decently operationally heavy, right? So I couldn't suddenly open up a new market without going up and setting up a warehouse and setting up a refurbishment center. So
and you'd have to
kind of market
buy trucks and all for logistics and all of that.
Absolutely. So we won't buy them, but we would lease them. But that's a cost that gets added on. So you need the market to be of a certain size for you to be able to serve it in a manner where it makes sense. So we realized that this the problem hai because it's not going to grow unless we got into a mode where we said, let's go and create the category, which was still doable, right? But then that required a very different way of operating, and it required a very different skill set from us as well. And market creation required a different mentality. It requires a certain charisma on part of the founder to go and raise that money. It requires a certain skill set in terms of marketing. And we didn't have that.
Help me understand this, like creating a category challenge. So you're saying, like, say, what Oyo Roams did was like creating a category where they raised and they were valued at like $18 billion at their peak or something like that. So that would mean that that's what it means to create a category.
I mean, yes, to a certain extent, but even there also the need for a hotel room exists. They're just telling you this is a different and an easier way for you to get a room that has a predictable quality. True creation of a category is, say you look at Grid, for example, right? Nobody could have said there is a need for something like this, but now we all use it, right? Now, it's still questionable on where it will land, but it's still a category that has come up from nowhere, right? And it could be, say, a consumer product, say AirPods is a classic example of that, right? When they started, people would have said the market for wireless earphones is a subset of the market for earphones. That's no longer the case. It's become a product in itself. Right? So I think that's what I meant by category creation. So we had to, we realized that we had to go out and get people to think of used goods in a very different way than they do today. People like us, people living in Bangalore, the more affluent ones, thought of it in a different way, like especially people who are not married, who are in rented apartment, they would say, I need something for 2 years. This is a better option. But that was not a thought that a lot of other people had. So that I think was the challenge over there. So we hit that point, and we briefly thought about raising that ton of capital to do that. We also tried, to be honest. We didn't succeed in that. And that's when we said, it's easier to then get acquired and work with a brand that's already large and probably has a wherewithal to do something like this. And that is when we eventually did get acquired by Quicker.
Like, did you consider leasing? Like leasing out furniture, like furniture rental?
We did. So for us, it
had a lot of action around that time. I remember there were 2-3 startups.
It did, yes. So I'll tell you, I always felt that it was a subset of our market because this required an even more savviness in terms of the customer's behavior, right? Because it's never a better economic proposition to lease something unless you are leasing it for a very short duration.
Because then
which is anyway something that
also underwriting the customers, like you'll.
Yeah, so it was always, for me, it was always a checkout option, right? That it's just a way for me to pay for something, which is now what's happening with all the BNPL stuff. So what we did was we actually enabled a rental through a Rento Mojo at that point. Rento Mojo was doing that. We got into a partnership with them. You could buy a furniture or an appliance from Zepho, but instead of paying upfront, you could rent it out. And what we would do at the back end is the inventory gets sold to Rento Mojo, which then takes care of leasing it out. And then we also told them that, once you get it back, we will give you a buyback price. You can give it back to us. But, it was more of underwriting. It was more of connection and felt more like a fintech play than an e-commerce play at that point. When I think it's still now become a full-fledged BNPL industry.
Okay, interesting. Do you think it would have been better to do less categories and you might have grown more? Like, say, if you only stuck to furniture, or
No, I think the problem was still that category itself was not large, right? So our problem was never complexity or the fact that for whatever reason it was difficult to manage more categories. In fact, it was helpful because the moment we started appliances, our order values went up. So it made our marketing even more efficient and the reason we started appliances was that, like, you move into a new place, you want to buy a bed, but then you also want to buy a refrigerator, right? So, or if you are moving out, you want to sell everything. So a lot of our sellers would tell us, "Arey, you're taking this furniture, why don't you take my appliances as well?" So that way, more categories was not a problem. The problem was that each of those categories was small, which is why we started mobile phones, because there the size was not a problem. Unfortunately for us, the problem was that we figured that category had a different rhythm of execution, where Cashify has cracked it, and it didn't really fit well into our model. So we always keep wondering now that had we thought of doing used cars or used bikes back then, might have been a different story, because those turned out to be the good markets in used goods, right? At least looking at how Spinny is doing now, and then there's a few players on used bikes as well. But instead went to mobile phones, which didn't play out as we had expected.
Interesting. And your approach after you buy something was like low touch.
So the way we thought about it was, we will buy a product where we know we can refurbish it, right? So for example, in TVs, where the economics really made sense for us was when we would buy these TVs that had broken screens. And they would come from everyone. They'd come from individuals, but then they'll also come from businesses. Like Flipkart would take a ton of them in their logistics. Right? So this is a new TV with a broken screen. And we would import these panels and we would refurbish them and we would put new panels on those.
Okay.
And there the margins were very good.
Okay, interesting. So what led to the quicker sale? The sale to quicker?
Yeah. So as I said, became very clear 2018 that this was not looking like it will become a very large business. Right? At a peak, we were doing about 20 crores a month, which was still way lower than what we would ideally need to do for this to be a large outcome for us and our investors.
And by then you had raised additional. You raised 6 million in 16 your Series A.
So we raised about around
10 odd million.
Yes, we did an internal Series B with the same investors, which is also probably a mistake in hindsight, because then
why is that?
This was done when we were flying, we were doing really well. Our investors were also happy. They said, why don't you take this money? For us, it was like, yeah, this makes sense. We don't like fundraising. Why bother? The problem is, when you do that, then the next time when you're not doing that well, it might have helped to have one more investor who could have said, I will back you for at least one more round. For us, our investors had already done that once. And honestly, we were not doing as well as we should, right? So they also didn't feel comfortable to back us again. So I'm not going to blame them. But had we had one more slightly more deep pocket investor, things could have been a little different.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So coming back to that deal.
Sorry. So going back, so we stopped growing, or at least we were still growing, but the growth was coming in at a cost that didn't make sense. Right? Put it this way, right? Like, so we could still we could still see that we can grow this to a 2x, 3x, wherever it was, but then the incremental marketing spend was just way high. Right? And that just didn't make sense to us. So then it was a question of either going and raising more money and going into this category creation exercise, or getting acquired by a larger brand that already has the ability to attract these users. So we didn't go down the race part, partly because we were not able to do it, partly because we were also not 100% convinced that it was a good fit for us. And therefore we started scouting for acquisition. And at that point, there were only 3 or 4 entities where this could fit well, right? Flipkart, Amazon were the 2 large e-commerce platforms, and then they were Quicker and OLX. Quicker was the one where the conversation was most interesting, especially because they had also realized that classifieds won't work. So they were trying to get into owning the transaction across all categories. This was a very good fit into their entire business. We didn't have to change a lot of things as such. They They needed a business that was doing this. This was already there. So not a single person had to be let go. So it was a very clean fit in that sense. And we did believe that Quicker had the scale and the brand value at that point to take this to the next level. Unfortunately, it did not happen. But that's what felt like the right model at that point.
And did the investors make money?
No, I mean, so this was a share swap. So they got stock in Quicker. So they would make money if Quicker eventually ends up having a great outcome. That right now is still up for debate.
Okay, interesting. So did you have a lock-in period with Quicker? Did you work there, or did you want to immediately move out? And
yeah, so we had a 6-month lock-in to hand over the business. I think it was pretty clear from the beginning that we had too much of an entrepreneurial spirit to be tied down there for too long. So we stuck around for those 6 months, handed over the business, and then we were out.
Okay, and
thinking about what next.
Okay, so tell me that process now. You're again starting from scratch. Did you?
So we started thinking again, and this time we wanted to sort of learn from our mistakes and do a slightly better job. So again, very analytical consultant kind of an approach. So look back and said what went wrong, right? And the biggest answer was market, like not that large enough.
Right.
So we said, this time whatever we do, the market has to be very large. Like we're not going to compromise on that. And we started thinking again. And what happened this time was that healthcare was a sector that sort of came up very early in our deliberations. And it's obviously very large. The thing that excited us was that this is one of the few sectors where not a lot has still been done, right? If you look at the impact of technology, internet over the last decade or two in India, this is one sector where you still haven't seen a lot of change. So it was also exciting in that sense that there is probably a very large outcome waiting to be built. And there is not a lot of competition. It was obviously a fairly difficult sector to crack as well. I remember when I met friends and folks from the investing community to discuss what I should do, people told me healthcare is a startup graveyard. Be very careful.
Because
and what also one of the contributing factors to getting into healthcare was that my co-founder comes from a family of doctors. So Karan, his parents are both doctors. His brother is a doctor. Most of his extended family is full of doctors. His father was running his own super specialty hospital. So he always felt like the odd one out in his family, and he always had this urge to do something in healthcare. And this time was like, you know what, let's actually do something over here. And in fact, after Quicker, he had briefly moved back home. So his father was, as I said, was running a hospital that had not been doing as well as they had expected. So typical bravado of an ex-consultant, engineer, chalo, I'll come in and I'll crack it. And then quickly realized he doesn't work out. Like it's a very different business and it's not easy. He was also not able to do a lot. So he was the one who kind of pushed us, let's look at this hospital space. It is interesting. It's not easy, but it is interesting. And I think the part that got us over the hump of healthcare not being exciting and not being viable enough from a business point of view was the fact that we realized that most of the attempts that had happened so far were either in the primary healthcare space or preventive healthcare, one of those things, right? And unfortunately, the ticket size in any of these transactions is not very large.
Right.
So, very difficult for a company to make money unless you build like a lot of scale and like a great brand. Otherwise, if you're monetizing a 500 rupee consultation, there is just not enough for everyone to make money.
Right.
So this time we said, we will go after tertiary care and secondary care, like so inpatient care, where at least the transaction sizes are a lot higher. So these are upwards of 50,000, 1 lakh. And therefore, at least there are margins available for someone to come in and demand a certain pie from that, as long as they are adding value. Within primary care, even if you add a lot of value, it's still very difficult. And the quantum is just so small that the scale has to be very large.
Can you define these terms, primary, tertiary, secondary care?
Yeah, so primary is a consultation. I was playing badminton, now I have pain in my shoulder. I just want to go and meet an orthopedic doctor. That's primary care, right? I'm just getting a consultation done. Secondary or tertiary care, inpatient care is, I want to know, I was diagnosed, I got a test done, and it turns out I torn my ligament and I have to get some surgery done to fix that. And the consultation was 500,000 rupees, but then this surgery is upwards of 1 lakh. What we said was we ideally want to be sitting on this side versus the primary care side. So that's the one reason why we felt that at least we would not run into the same problem as everyone else. We might run into a different problem, but it will at least be different. The part that obviously did get us very excited was that no matter how you cut it, this was a very, very large market. Inpatient care today is upwards of $80 billion annually in India. Right? And then whatever cut you want to put, like you remove government, you remove tier 3, tier 4, you remove the large brands, it's still a very, very large market that's out there up for grabs. And on the patient side, one thing that became very clear as we spoke with patients was that most patients did not have a go-to brand that they could trust. People like you and me, we are privileged enough to have the ability to walk into an Apollo or a Medanta or a Fortis. And we have that implicit trust. They might overcharge me. They might not treat me very well, but clinically it's going to be great. I'll be fine. Most of the average folks do not have the ability to walk into these hospitals because they don't have the cash, or they just don't have an insurance plan to back that. And in the absence of that, they don't have a go-to brand that they can have the same blind trust on. On top of that, the problem is that clinically, so I don't have that trust. I also don't have a great experience. I was talking about how the sector hasn't had a lot of improvement at all based on technology and internet. So experience is still the same as what it was 20 years, 30 years back. And there is also an inherent lack of transparency when it comes to pricing. You don't know what you will be charged until you're getting discharged. And they'll give you an estimate, but then there is some extra, something extra that you always get charged on. And there is not much you can do at that point. You just feel that you're being cheated in some shape and form. So very clear opportunity to build a go-to brand for the average audience, which could solve for the pain points of clinical quality, experience, and transparency on pricing. And that those three pillars is what we felt would allow you to be trusted. And what we also figured on the supply side was that there were a lot of high quality hospitals that were struggling. And this to me was the biggest shock, because I had always grown up with the thinking, you are a good doctor, you set up your own hospital, that's it, you are sorted for life. That's not the case, because all doctors tend to think of it this way, and all of these doctors are setting up hospitals in tier 1 cities because, that's where they were all working. So think about a doctor who worked for 15 years at an Apollo or a Fortis or an Himesh, and now they want to set up their own hospital. They're not going to uproot their family and move to a tier 3 town. They're going to do it in a metro or a tier 1 city. And these cities have a bit of an oversupply today. So there are a lot of these independently run mid-sized secondary care or tertiary care hospitals. And these hospitals don't have a great brand yet. So the doctor might have a great brand, but the doctor's brand only allows for, say, a 20% utilization of the hospital. How do I fill in the rest of the beds? As a doctor, I don't know. What compounds problem is that this is perhaps the one sector where the owner of the business, who in most cases is the doctor, is not a good businessman. These people have not been trained to do business, right? What they love to do is practice medicine. They care about clinical quality. They care about outcomes. Now suddenly they have to deal with suppliers of drugs and negotiate prices. They have to figure out how to market themselves. They have to deal with, putting out ads in newspapers, and this is all alien territory. So as a result, a lot of these independent doctor-run hospitals are struggling. And this is where we saw the opportunity, where we said, on one hand, you don't have a great trusted brand that people can go to. On the other side, you actually have good quality supply that is not able to do well. And the patient knows that there are these 10 hospitals in my locality, but as a patient, I don't know which of these 10 is clinically sound, because they all look similar from the outside.
Right.
And unfortunately, there is no clinical data that any of the hospitals share today, right? So I don't know what the success rate of a specific procedure in a hospital A versus B, C, and D. So what we do now is, we said we will go and partner with these independent run hospitals, which are clinically sound, right? So I'll go to a locality, I'll partner with one hospital out of the 10 that is clinically great. They have good infrastructure, they have good infection control protocols, they have good quality of nursing. I will co-brand them. I will tell them that, look, I'll start driving more patients to your hospital. And then over time, I will also work with the hospital on all of the other non-clinical functions. So, it could be putting in technology for better experience. It could be putting in technology for processing insurance claims. It could be lending for patients. It could be procurement of drugs and consumables, where I can not only bring efficiency, but I can also bring in scale because I work with 500 people like you. Right? So our value prop to the hospital is that we are the new age franchise model that you want to go for. So you partner with us and we will then make sure that your economics are sorted. And for the patients, this becomes the brand that they can trust. I'll go back to those three pillars: clinically, good clinical outcomes, which comes by virtue of us being very, very careful about who we work with. Pricing, we put in a fixed price package wherever possible. So one of the features of our product is if you come to us, you want to get a surgery done, we will give you a price that is fixed. And that price does not change irrespective of the number of days of stay in the hospital or some extra bits that had to happen. And lastly, experience, where we are saying we are putting in our own counseling layer, we are putting in our own technology. We'll ensure you get your documents on WhatsApp. You can do a teleconsult follow-up instead of going to the doctor to visit again. There is a counselor who answers all your questions. We'll ensure that a doctor is more receptive to your questions than they usually are. So all of that adds up into a meaningfully different experience.
Interesting. Tell me about the first hospital you onboarded. What all did you do for them?
One of the other learnings we had from some Zepho was what works in Bangalore doesn't work elsewhere. So this time we wanted to be doubly sure that we're building a business that works in the entirety of India, or at least a good part of it, versus just 3 or 4 metros. So we went to Chandigarh to start, while our team was still based in Bangalore, because that felt like a market that was, a good mix of modern healthcare and, a modern city with very traditional thinking. And, like Chandigarh doesn't have a lot of migrant population. People who live there have been living there for a while. In most likelihood, they will have at least a GP that they will go to. So they will know where to go.
Right.
And that is what most of India looks like. Unlike a Bangalore, where most of the population has only been here for the last 5-10 years.
Right.
So, so I don't know who a good doctor in Bangalore is, but if I were living in Chandigarh, I would most likely have a good idea. Right? So we said, let's test ourselves in a market that is exactly opposite. And if it works there, then obviously it'll work in Bangalore as well. And then what helped was that Karan's parents were in Chandigarh. So among all the tier 2-ish places that we could have chosen, Chandigarh was the one that we did, because at least we would get meetings with hospitals because of his father.
And Karan's father was running a hospital himself.
He was running the hospital himself.
You didn't want to take that up as your first hospital?
No, we didn't. So it felt like a bit of a conflict, to be honest. But yeah, because of him, we did have at least a connect with a bunch of other hospitals. But that is all we got. We got connects, right? So you can tell them that these people are going to come and meet you. And then we would wait for hours outside the doctor's cabin to turn out. I remember the first few meetings very clearly. They would all laugh at our face. They were like, "Arey, you guys are all coming from Bangalore. You think internet mein kuch hota hai, kuch nahi hota hai." There is no way you can drive a single patient for me. And, I mean, we also didn't know, right? So we were pretty humble about it. We said, we might be right, but give us a chance. And I think what worked for us back then and what works for us today also is that ours has always been a performance-based model. So as a hospital, you pay us only if you deliver. Otherwise, you don't. And it's not that we come in and ask you to revamp completely, right? We don't ask you to repaint your
revenue shares. Like of the patients you generate, you take a revenue.
Exactly. So it's not even an upfront marketing expense, right? It's not that I'm convincing them to go and put money on a Google ad and then you'll get a funnel and you'll be able to make money out of it. I'm saying I'll do all of that. If I get you a patient, you give me a certain percentage. So that is what got us in, right? They said, I don't think you can do anything. But fair, I'll allow you to try it out. And our conditions were simple. We wanted a counselor from our end to be in the hospital. We call them the Ayu Mitras. We still have them. They are the bridge between the hospital and our patients, and they ensure that the patient is treated well enough. The second was we wanted some control on pricing, which again, because we were getting the patient in the hospital was fine. And that's about it. And we wanted some co-branding, but nobody gave it at that point, right? So they said, get some patients and then we'll worry about it. And we said, okay. So we had a very rudimentary website. We got started and we were then able to actually start driving these patients. And I remember even in the first few patients, there was always this doubt that the doctor will have. This guy might have come for my name, kuch hoga. But then as the scale went up, they realized, and the patient would also tell them, I looked up online, these guys were very clear on where I should go. They helped me understand. So gradually we started building that equity, and that is what then opened the doors for us to do a lot of the other things that we do with the hospitals, right? Where there is some effort needed from the hospital. If they want us to process their insurance claims, there is some effort that we need to put in. So all of that then eventually came in. But the first few hospitals were all highly skeptical.
And
but
you
at the
opened
same
up
time, quite supportive.
multiple hospitals in Chandigarh, like you wanted to cover the city.
I think we had about 5 hospitals when we started. And the idea was that we wanted to have a good coverage of all specialties, which is how we still think of our network. So we ideally want, all specialties to be covered reasonably well. We want at least 3 or 4 specialists. And secondly, we also wanted options in, all geographies. Like Chandigarh is also a fairly large city geographically. So, you have a Panchkula, you have Chandigarh, even Mohali. So just 1 or 2 hospitals in core Chandigarh are not good enough to serve the entire region. So we had, in the first time, we had a hospital in Mohali. We had, I think, 2 in Chandigarh, 1 in Panchkula to begin with. And then gradually we added on a little bit more.
Okay, interesting. You said you give patients a fixed price, which means you're now taking on that risk that it may cost more than what you are promising the patient. Like how did you figure out pricing?
Yeah. So see, I think what worked for us and partly why we went ahead with this approach was that the hospitals were already used to this with the insurers. So if you were to look at an agreement that a hospital has, say, with someone like an ICICI Lombard, there is a fixed price, right? So ICICI will say for this procedure, I'll pay you 70,000 rupees. Now the hospital might try and bill more and then get the patient to pay it, but ICICI is not going to pay more than that.
Right.
So they were used to this as a concept. And what we did was, we said we don't want to necessarily say what the price is, at least not then. Today we have a view on that as well. But at that point, we said we will not tell you that the price should be 80K and not 1 lakh. But the moment we finalize 1 lakh, it can't change after that. And the problem in hospitals is that they will tell you a lakh, you'll say, okay, fine, take a lakh. But then at the time of discharge, they'll say, like I had an experience, this was long back. You're getting out and then, we had to use this extra medicine. There was this extra doctor that had to visit you and consumables. They all get added up and what option do you have then to pay and suck it up. So we wanted to avoid that. So we ensured that all our patients were offered this package. And that was one thing that then the patients also liked and appreciated.
Okay. So again, tell me that journey. What was your one when you had these 5 hospitals?
It started and then COVID happened, right? So it was very...
2019 was your one?
Not ideal start. 2019, December is when we went live.
Okay.
Year 1 for all practical purposes 2020. So we were barely getting started and then the lockdown happened. And I remember we scrambled to put together a teleconsult product in 3 days at that point. And that is when the teleconsultation guidelines came out, right? So the doctors were also then sort of okay with doing that. So first wave, all we did was just some teleconsults and that's it. More of it. Nothing.
Yeah, because hospitals were not doing any other procedure except for handling COVID cases. So therefore, you could not.
They didn't even have COVID cases. So if you remember the first wave, even the hospitals are empty. There was just nothing happening. Because second wave, everyone had COVID cases. First wave, there was just nothing. Only emergency was being taken care of. And we had no way to, nobody knew of us. So nobody would call us if they had an emergency. So we had zero revenue at that point. All we had was these people who were doing teleconsult, and it was a pipeline getting built up for whenever the lockdown gets lifted. And we then saw some of them come back and get procedures done. But that was about it. But the good part about it was that we had just gotten started. So we had a few initial learning. And usually what happens is as you get that initial bit, you start scaling up and you don't always get your house in order, right? So we got that opportunity to say, okay, we started with this thesis. At least a few things behave differently. Now we have these 2 months. We started working on our product. We got a very good backend, CRM and like a few of those standard systems built. So that at least when the lockdown got lifted, we were ready from a product standpoint, which you never have the luxury of when you start off. But yeah, so it got lifted, and then I think we started seeing a pretty good response. And then what happened was we noticed that our superpower was that once we got a patient to a hospital, they'll convert over there. And that is what the doctors and hospitals also noticed. because the
Okay.
experience was just so good, right? So they will feel that all of these things together were so, they could trust it so much that these patients who had no idea of IU Health, and we were like very small, we had no ATL, like there was no presence at all. But they would come in and see these hospitals, they would come in and see the service, and they would then start converting.
The conversion happened because of the IU Mitra. Like you had that IU Mitra there. So the regular hospital experiences, you have to wait a lot and you have to go from room to counter with no one to really guide you. Whereas here, there is an IU Mitra who's like doing more hand holding than the regular experience.
Yes, that was one of the big reasons. The others were the pricing being transparent, the comfort that people were able to get on that. I think the other part that we realized after we started working was the benefit of a network. We would see a lot of patients who will come in with these insurance plans that might not get accepted in one hospital, but then we'll always find a hospital in the network which will accept that. And that was always a strong value add. So we raised more money. So we had raised a seed round before we started. And then we raised a Series A.
I think about 1.3 million was your seed, and then Series A was about 6 million, 6 odd million.
Correct. Yes. Yes, 6 odd million. So we raised that in late 2020. And then we got to Bangalore. And then Bangalore was obviously easier. Like we always knew it was going to be easier. It's obviously a larger city, so people were more professional. It was easier for us to get them to agree to a term. It was easier for us to get them to treat the patients in a better fashion. What was not as easy was generating demand, because this was also more competitive. This is where everyone else is spending money online, including the hospitals and the larger chains. Right? You go and search for a knee replacement in Bangalore, you will see everyone running an ad. Right? It could be a startup, it could be a doctor, it could be a hospital, it will be an Apollo as well. So that part was more challenging. 2021 end is when we raised that fundamental round.
27 million.
So this was 27 million. So this was like properly large money. And then we got into NCR. We acquired a small
What was your what kind of GMV were you doing by that time, or revenue wise, like by end of
2021 end, we were doing about 3 odd crores of procedure values, right? Then, so in our business, there is also like a lot more GMBs. There could be diagnostics on top. There could be consultation GTV. There could be GTV of insurance that we process. There could be GTV of some lending that we might have enabled. But the core demand GTV was about 3 crores at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we raised that round and we launched NCR and Jaipur, and eventually Hyderabad as well. So now we are in 5 regions. We work with about 130 hospitals. And the focus now is to sort of continue to go deeper in these markets. That I think the good thing for us has been that we've seen that we are able to drive a lot of depth in each of the markets. And with hospitals that we work, any mature hospital will drive 15-20% of their overall top line. Right? Today, with these 5 markets itself, we see the ability to grow another 4-5x from where we are. We are already now at about a 5x of where we were last year when we raised, and we will be at around 4-5x by the end of 2023 with these 5 markets. So
amazing. So was this 27 million round like an opportunistic raise? Like the market was hot, and because you had just raised 6 million, I'm assuming you would not have needed funds so soon.
Partly, yes. I mean, so the 6 million was raised about a year back, right? Like we raised that in December 2020, and we only announced it in 2021. So I think what confuses people is that when you look at least the press releases, 2021 is when we talk about the Series A, and then suddenly 2022 there's talk of Series B, but the rounds are actually almost 12 months separated from each other. That said, when we raised, we still had the money. So it was not that we wanted the money then, or we had to go and raise them. But one of the things that you learn also when you've been a founder for a long time is you want to be fundraising at all points, and ideally, optimize for not just the time but also the quality of the investor. So Fundamentum is someone we've been talking to for the last more than a year. They started talking to us before we raised our Series A, and they were very clear that they would not do the Series A, but they're still talking to us. And they built that conviction on the business over that 1 year. We built conviction on them. So I think when they eventually did come to us and told us that they wanted to put money, it felt like a good time to do that. And then we also added on a little bit. I think what was opportunistic was we we went out to raise about a 20 million. We ended up raising almost a 27, and then a little bit of debt. And that addition was a little bit opportunistic, right? So there was strong demand. Obviously, the market was very good at that point. And
Right.
back with the mind, we also knew we don't know how long this thing goes on for,
Right,
and
right, right. Yeah,
the
yeah.
money was coming in on decent terms.
It's better to
So
raise
we took
when
that.
it's available rather than to be hunting when you are
Absolutely.
desperate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As long as it's coming from people that you like, right? I think what we've been very lucky with at IU is, if I talk about all of our investors, that starting from Stellaris, Vertex, Fundamentum, and some of the other newer investors that have come in as well, uh, they're all very aligned with the way we want to build this business. Right? And I don't mean it in a way that they agree with whatever I want to do. We do disagree a lot, but they are aligned with the fact that we want to ensure that the quality always remains important. We are okay to not do a 10x year on year. We'll do a 5x, 4x, but we'll do it in a sustainable fashion. Long before the market changed, I remember our board had been telling us, you should not try and burn this all in a year. There's no point. Which was at
Right.
least back then not as
Not a
much of
popular
a
opinion.
yeah, it was not a popular opinion at all, because
Yeah.
everyone was looking elsewhere and saying, "Oh, look, this guy raised more money. This guy raised more money. We don't want to get caught."
Amazing. But
Good
what do you
timing.
need the money for? Like, what do you need to burn on? What are the things? Because you're asset light. So,
Yeah.
compared to Zephyr, where you actually had to take those warehouses and do all of that work, here
Yeah.
you don't need to. I mean, here it's pure rev share, no asset investment. So, what do you need to spend on?
So one is marketing.
Okay.
Unlike Zepho, at least in IU, for a while, we were not making money on the unit, right? We still had to go out of way to convince people on why they should trust IU. So our acquisition costs were higher than the revenue that we made.
And
that
here,
is no
I
longer
think
the case.
there's also more competition for those same customers, right? Because, uh, like when I'm searching for some issue, I will probably also see a Practo ad for a doctor, and like the Apollo and Fortis also have. And then Pristine Care is also like a competition, right?
Yeah, no. So there definitely is more competition, no doubt. So that does play a role. But I guess it's just that there is an upfront investment into some of these things. So, for example, just the way the funnel behaves, right? Today, you spend money to acquire a potential patient who will get a consultation done today, right? Now, the decision on whether they need a surgery might take some time, and they eventually say, "Nahi, surgery nahi karani," right? I am also the same. I'm not blaming others. That's how we all are. So people take their own free time to decide. So that funnel takes some time to play out. While your cost is put upfront, and then we do invest a decent amount of money in brand building. So ATL holdings and all of those things. So there is definitely a marketing investment upfront,
You're
especially.
spending on brand building at the hospital premise, like putting up your hoarding there, or also like in general, like more hyper local approaches to put up hoardings in that area, like bus
Both.
stops and all.
Both. So hoardings are cheap, right? Like I guess the hoarding at the hospital is cheap. You just have to put your own branding and people
Right,
which
right,
hospitals
right.
are okay. But doing the rest of it is costly. So that is what has taken some money. And obviously then there's a team, right? Like the way the team is staffed today, it is staffed for a much larger business. So what at least we've been focusing on is that the mature cities should start becoming profitable. Today, Chandigarh is already there. Bangalore, which is our second market, will turn cash flow positive in 6 months. Right? It's not just contribution, but cash flow positive. So the way we look at our model is, you start a city, you put in a lot of cost upfront, both in terms of people, in terms of your brand building efforts, but then over time, you start reaping the benefits of that. Like now in Bangalore, almost 20% of our patients come through a word of mouth referral. So, that has been bringing down our CAC significantly, which is why we now make money on the unit and we'll soon make money at the city.
So, what is the funnel like for a patient? There'll be an inquiry, they'll fill up a form, then what happens?
So they would discover us online, or they would discover us through an offline partner who will refer them to IU Health. This could be a diagnostic lab, this could be a chemist, this could be a GP. Right? So everyone in the healthcare ecosystem essentially.
And they get some referral bonus.
They get some referral bonus.
Okay.
For example, we might work with a chemist where we'll give them a certain amount for every lead that comes to us, right? Like that's an example. Once the patient reaches out to us, they'll talk to our team who will help and will try and understand what is it that they need help with. A lot of patients that we speak with actually have no idea who they should go and meet. Right? A classic case is, I have chest pain, this must be gas, I want to meet a gastroenterologist. It ends up being a cardio case more often than not, unfortunately. Right? So the team will do basic understanding of what that issue is and who they should go and meet. And then they'll fix up and they'll help also understand where the patient wants to go. So in terms of where they are placed, but also if they have an insurance plan, then in what hospital in our network does it get accepted? And then sometimes the patient also wants to know which doctor is there. The doctor might be specialized in one thing or the other. So they'll fix up an appointment.
So this team is like an inside sales team.
It's like an inside sales team. Yes.
Okay.
And their sole focus is to drive an appointment. Like this team has to get patients to come and visit our doctors. Now, once a patient visits a doctor, that's where the Ayu Mitra at the hospital takes over. And they'll meet the doctor. The doctor might give a decision immediately, or the doctor might suggest a few diagnostics that need to be done, and then eventually a decision happens. In case it's diagnostics, they also get support from us in getting those done. And then, they can maybe do a teleconsult later to just talk to the doctor, because the doctor doesn't need to see them in person again. About 30% of patients that come to us get recommended a surgery. And we are very careful about this number. So for us, any hospital or a doctor that does more than 50%, there's an instant red flag, and our clinical team goes in and has a look, because you ideally don't want to be recommending too many surgeries, right? Because that's the usual abuse that tends to happen. And that is an instant trust killer. Like I as a patient go to Ayu Health, I'm told, oh, get a surgery done, otherwise it's going to be something. Then I go to another doctor, he says, no, just have this medicine and it'll be fine, and instantly kills all the trust. So very careful about that. And that's a complete doctor decision. So there's no incentive or any influence that the team has over that. Once the surgery is recommended, that's when then our Ayu Mitras will try and understand what the patient wants and convert them into getting the procedure done.
Okay.
Yeah. And then post-op, again, we will sort of be around to help. So, at the time of hospitalization, you need help with insurance processing, bunch of other things. Post-discharge also, there are follow-ups that happen.
If they need an appointment, then you set up like a follow-up appointment and all that.
Yeah, that will happen. So they can do it on the app, they can do it on a WhatsApp channel. Usually they'll call up the Ayu Mitra, like they'll strike a good rapport with those people.
So what's the role of tech in this? One part of tech is, of course, lead gen, where you would have that whole lead gen process, you would have built digitization there. What else is there?
So see, tech is the main enabler of this business, right? There's a lot of moving parts across this business. So, I like to compare this with, say, e-commerce, where again, like if you look at a Flipkart, they're essentially getting an order, picking a product from the warehouse, delivering it to you, right? But tech is what holds it all together, ensures that there is predictability on the SLAs, there is visibility on what's happening. The same is true here as well. So, when you call us, for example, and the inside sales team talks to you, there is a very strong recommendation in the back that helps the agent understand who the patient should go and visit, right? It's something as basic as just asking the patient for their location and then instantly showing hospitals that are the nearest and what is the distance. It's a very, very simple thing, but then it could be something as complicated as asking 5 questions from patients and then throwing up recommendation based on those 5 references, right? So, so there's a strong recommendation aspect. Once they're in the hospital, like we spoke about how the Ayu Mitra plays a very important role. Our eventual vision is that a lot of what the Ayu Mitra does is something that product takes care of. Today, Ayu Mitra is the one person I can ask any question I want. Increasingly, a lot of those questions are moving on product. Ayu Mitra is a person who will help me get insurance processed. We're now building a product where we are trying to integrate with all the insurers so that when you go into a hospital that we run through us, instead of taking 5 hours for an approval to come, it takes half an hour. So that's where
you'll process the claim on their behalf because you'll get the invoice.
We'll process the claim on their behalf. We'll help the hospital integrate directly with the insurer. We will build in efficiencies there. So tech is what plays a role in each of these steps and keeps it all together and keeps ensuring that the quality of the service at each point gets better.
So is there an app for patients also?
There is an app for patients, yes.
What does that do for them? How does it help them?
So it's that will allow them to browse hospitals and allow them to search for specific ailments, specific specialties, look up doctor profiles, book an appointment with them. And then it also gets customized a bit based on where the patient is in the journey. So if a patient has already seen a doctor, they've been recommended a procedure, then the app will also throw up certain recommendations on, what the patient might want to read about. For example, like say, I go into a hospital and I've been recommended a surgery, but I'm just very wary of getting a surgery. That's it. Right. So what the app shows me is testimonials. It shows me a doctor video talking about how simple this procedure is. Whereas when you go in, your concern is price, let's say. Right. So then the app will talk about, you can get financing done. Here are 5 other options of other hospitals in the network where you might get a better price. Talk to your eye or get an appointment done there. So it sort of customizes the flow a little bit based on what the patient might.
Yeah. Okay. What about patient health records? Is that on your roadmap? Like the app
it is. So so today we do that in a very rudimentary way where the document gets scanned, or if it's already electronic, then we pick it up and put it into the patient's health record that's accessible on the app. But there's obviously a lot more that could be done. I think that's one area where it will only really take off once the government mandates those things. Today, the doctors are just very comfortable writing something on a piece of paper, and people have tried a lot to convert that text into legible stuff, but it just doesn't work. So we are a little realistic about what we can do over there. But that said, I think that is the next level, and at some point it is going to happen with all the digital health focus that's going on.
So what are like your wild ambitions about Ayu Health, stuff that you want to see it achieve maybe in a 10-year span? Like, what's the long-term vision?
So see, I think there are 2 things over there, right? One is if you look at Apollo, right? I think that's the company I get really inspired by within healthcare, right? Like Apollo spent probably a few decades building a brand that stood for high quality healthcare. That is all that they did. Right? They were running high quality hospitals, great outcomes. They were the pioneers. Every new technology will come to Apollo for the first time. And now they've got to a point where Apollo as a name is synonymous with trust in healthcare. Now when they do clinics, which are a pure franchise, or diagnostics, or even an insurance plan, pharmacy. Now they have the Apollo 24/7 app. It's all something that the patient trusts. That's one bit of where we want to be, right? Like we want Ayu Health to become a name that's in that league where, the name stands for trust, which is why we don't focus on, we never say we are the most affordable option or, the focus is just that we are the most trusted healthcare platform that you should go to. And then eventually once I have that trust, then I can do a bunch of other things leveraging that trust. Obviously, I have to continue to maintain that trust, but it's a lot easier versus someone who stands for affordability trying to do that, right? So it's always a bit of a challenge for people to come from that side into the other. And the other bit is, which is the wild ambition, right? Eventually, our vision of Ayu Health is that this becomes not just a hospital network. It becomes the all-encompassing healthcare plan that you go for. So the way I see it is, a patient should subscribe to an Ayu Health plan, right? That includes a certain cover on inpatient, on consultations, on diagnostics, on pharmacy. And I just have this trust on Ayu Health. Whatever I need, I'll go to an Ayu Health hospital and I'll be taken care of.
Amazing. So you would want to go asset light in all of these, or would you want to, for example, acquire a e-pharmacy, acquire a diagnostics company, and build out all parts of this full stack health?
So see, again, I don't know yet. I think I'll tell you the approach that we will be driven by is we will do what's scalable, but at the same point, like the primary driver will be what allows us to retain this trust.
No, because something like diagnostics, you could just do like what Healthians does, where you have like an aggregator aggregating labs and
No, I think that's the that's one approach, right? The other is what see someone like an Orange Health has taken, where they're saying we'll own everything, but we'll give you a very fast service. Uh, my sense is, and again, I might be wrong here, but my sense is that the main thing in that space is also building some comfort with the quality of the test. I have spoken to a lot of patients who don't trust a lot of these newer platforms because they are saying, I don't know if the test will be accurate. No, actually, I have no, I don't understand this well, so I don't know if getting that test accurate is a big deal or not, but it at least is a big deal in the minds of the patients. Right? So when a pharmacy buys a thyroid, you can see the rationale behind it because the pharmacy doesn't yet carry that trust, but a thyroid does.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So your immediate competitor is Pristine Care. What is the difference between the two of you?
I would say they're not our immediate competitor. They are actually a very, very different business. So first of all, the overlap on the kind of surgeries we do is hardly 10%. They are exclusively focused on daycare. Right? So their focus is procedures like kidney stones, hernia, piles, fistula, which are all sub 50K procedures, very commoditized. People are usually shopping for the best price. For us, that's 10% of what we do. Our focus is more tertiary care or medical management, right? So for us, cardiology is the largest category. ICU admissions is very large. Things like dengue or COVID, when it was around, was large. So in terms of demand, we are not going after the same sort of patients in most cases. And in terms of supply also, our models are very different. Pristine's model is that they will have their own doctor seeing the patient in a clinic that Pristine runs. And they will then take the patient to a hospital where the hospital has spare capacity and they get paid something to use that capacity. Our model is that we'll go and partner with that hospital. And we are then a strategically more important partner because I'm not saying that I'm going to take 80% and give you 20. I am actually the other way around, right? So for the hospital, we are the way to improve their business. And then the way we are positioned to the patients also is that we are a hospital chain or a hospital network. So very different business in that sense. And then a lot of our revenue now comes from a bunch of these value-added services where we will enable insurance processing for our hospital. We'll enable them to buy drugs in a better fashion. We'll enable them to lend to their patients, which might not even be brought by us, right? These are patients who walk into the hospital, but they need financing. That is now about 30% of our revenue and will continue to grow. So someone like
Apollo
a
Fortis.
Yeah, Apollo Fortis, and maybe like if you take a step below, right? Because that's again a very premium audience. We also probably don't serve that today. But our audience is then going to a Spurge, right? Or they are going into a hospital that has, say, 2 branches in Bangalore and has been around for a while. So those are our large competitors on the demand side. On the supply side, the competition is more, say, the traditional franchises, or there is this O&M model in healthcare where you will have someone come in and run the hospital for you. Whereas what we are saying is that you continue to run it, but we make it very easy for you. We'll give you the operating system that you can run the hospital on with minimum headache.
This O&M model is what, say, like a Fortis does, right? I've seen a lot of
some of these are chains do it.
Fortis hospitals.
Yes. So they will take on the hospital. It's like a Marriott, right? Like someone else owns the hotel, but then Marriott comes in and runs it.
Okay. Lending is interesting. You have like a fintech product now where you have NBFCs who are lending out and you help in underwriting and all of that. Or like how does lending work for you?
Yeah. So today we don't underwrite ourselves. We will work with fintech partners who will do the underwriting. We sort of are the bridge between the hospital and the lenders. And then in some cases, we will do part of the underwriting because, say, we might be processing that insurance and we know what the amount is that is likely to be accepted by the insurers. Eventually, we might want to become a lender ourselves, and that's the plan somewhere down the line.
So you're working with NBFCs or with fintechs who further have their own network of NBFCs who?
Right now with fintechs.
Okay, got it.
Because most NBFCs won't directly lend to patients unless they are very credit worthy, in which case they anyways get a loan on their credit card or through the bank. So
true.
The profile that needs lending is the one that is today catered to by fintechs, or we will have to then come in and put in our own underwriting and do that job of a fintech. But there's a regulatory angle to it which we have not yet explored. So we are not technically an authorized fintech. So we do need someone else to come and do that for us.
Okay, got it. So you have like a procurement portal for hospitals where they can order their regular supplies. Like in a way, it's
Yeah,
like a
that's so
Moglik
today is not
kind of
technically,
a. But
yeah,
that's part of the
that's
vision,
what it will
like.
be.
Okay.
That's part of the vision. So the vision is that uh, we are not a platform, right? We are
Hmm.
essentially the buyer representing the hospital. Like if you look at all of these large chains, they have these centralized buying units called
Yeah.
CBUs.
Yeah.
So an Apollo will have a CBU that will go and negotiate for at least the 80% of drugs for each hospital in their network, and the
Oh,
tail is
yeah.
managed locally,
Mhm.
right? So what they do is they'll go to the brand and say, look, I'm going to buy this amount of this drug. What is the best price that you can give me? And today the problem for a small hospital is that they can't charge as much to the patient as an Apollo, and their cost of consumables, cost of drugs is actually 30-40% higher than the larger chain. So they're
Yeah.
getting,
Yeah.
it's a double whammy for them. We're saying we'll go and resolve that. So we will not become a distributor ourselves, which is say what a pharmacy or at least pharmacy's parent entity or an Acnomed or some of these players will be. So we would rather align a price directly with the brand or a large distributor, and we will get you access to good quality of service through a good distributor and good prices through our direct relationship with the brands. That's the
Okay.
model over there.
Okay. So hospitals on your network can log in and place their orders, and those orders are directly fulfilled by the manufacturer or the suppliers.
Yeah, suppliers, the approved suppliers of the manufacturers.
Right. And those prices are negotiated by you, so hospitals are getting access
The
to
prices are negotiable. So it'll always be a better price than what the hospital gets on their own.
Yeah, because of collective buying happening here.
Collective buying,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So, you know, do you see yourself raising more funds in the next 2-3 years, or what is your path to profitability like?
So as I said, we will be profitable in our core markets very soon. Chandigarh is already there. We will be profitable in Bangalore middle of this year. We should ideally get close to profitability in some of the other markets also very soon. So we're not looking to raise right now, but we will mostly want to raise, say, by the end of this year, because I think that will be a good time for us to launch more cities. Today, we are very razor focused on doing more within the existing markets. So we will want to launch more cities, which will require some capital. And then we'll also want to start building upon some of our other products, right? So I talked about insurance processing, procurement. A lot of these are fairly large independent businesses in their own right, and they require that sort of an effort. Today, we are sort of cobbling them together. So you talked about procurement portal and all. It's not really a portal today, right? We're saying, okay, we'll manage it. And like how you typically hack it as an early stage startup. So these are all very early stage businesses in among what is probably like a mid stage business. But at some point, we want to start giving them a lot more ammunition. And some of these will serve not just our network. For example, on insurance processing, we serve people outside of our network as well.
How do you monetize
So that
insurance
is what
processing? Like the hospital pays, or
the hospital pays. So there again, the problem for the hospital is that the insurance desk is not always very well run. Right? So they'll not get paid on time by the insurers, and they'll not get paid in full. Right? It could be a 5, 10, 15% disallowance. So what we're telling them is that instead of filing the claim directly with the insurer, you file it on our system. We will have the ability to process the claim in a manner where you are getting paid faster. So, initially it was manual intelligence. Now we are sort of prioritizing some of it, that
you
if
can
it
make
is this
sure
case,
the
then this is another
I's are
document.
dotted, the T's are crossed, basically.
Exactly. And then we also then want to go and talk to insurers and do something similar to what we're doing in procurement, right? Where we tell the insurers that, look, we're getting you these hospitals. We're going to ensure that there is minimal abuse, there's minimal fraud. But in exchange, you give some preferential terms to these hospitals. You treat them like you would treat a larger hospital, where you don't worry about things like fraud.
I mean, preferential term, what does that translate into? Like quicker payment?
That will translate into better prices. It'll translate into faster payouts. It'll translate into lesser queries. So, like for example, how an insurer will work with a Polo or a Manipal is that the default is that the claim is legit. And the exception is that there is some abuse. If the smaller hospital is the other way around. And unfortunately, that also happens because there is also a lot of fraud that genuinely happens in small hospitals. But what we are trying to tell the insurers is that we are putting in that layer. We will check for all of those things. Right? Maybe we will underwrite that risk. But then you treat them like you would treat an Apollo. You ensure you get pay them quickly. Then you can choose to audit 5 out of the 100 cases. And if you find any discrepancy, we'll come back and we will resolve, or we will bear the risk on that.
Amazing. Is there something I should have asked you?
No, actually, I think we covered pretty much everything. It's been a good chat.
And that brings us to the end of this conversation. I want to ask you for a favor now. Did you like listening to this show? I'd love to hear your feedback about it. Do you have your own startup ideas? I'd love to hear them. Do you have questions for any of the guests that you heard about in this show? I'd love to get your questions and pass them on to the guests. Write to me at ad@thepodium.in. That's ad@thepodium.in.